Good morning, and a warm welcome from IC Johannesburg. I think I woke up this morning thinking today is definitely marks the first of winter. It's April, but it's been quite a bit of rain and it's quite icy this morning. It's a warm welcome from me, your event host today. My name's Umar Hassan. I'm a director and service line leader at S&G Grant Thornton for business consulting, focusing on supporting clients in the land and the way in which they work from a sustainability perspective, helping organizations create value, navigate the new way of working as we move into sustainability and sustainability reporting. I take pleasure in welcoming you to our Sustainability Africa Dialogues webinar series. For me, it's an honor to have you with us today as we look at bridging the readiness gap and turning IFRS S1 and S2 into action. For those of you that's not familiar with S&G Grant Thornton, we are a leading audit, tax, and advisory firm. Born in the early days from a first Africa firm from a professional services, we support many clients in terms of co-creating solutions, providing independent assurance, but of course supporting them in navigating either new regulations or new ways of work or new strategy, one of it being definitely sustainability. This is the second edition of our Africa Dialogue Sustainability webinar series, which was launched in November 2025. The first one where we looked at unpacking the data-driven sustainability strategies in terms of supporting organizations in using data-led solutions, in terms of how do we navigate and report more consistently, accurately, and impactfully from a data-driven strategy for their sustainability. We also launched and introduced you to our Viva Sustainability tool. It supports organizations in digitizing the way in which they can create a bigger impact as they move forward to sustainability reporting itself. Today, I think we have an exciting agenda for you, and I'll take you through it very shortly. But we explore the world of IFRS S1 and S2 reporting, an area where many organizations have different understandings of in terms of how they navigate to it. How do they transition from voluntary ESG disclosures to investor-grade sustainability reporting? We will address the readiness gap between the current practices and emerging global expectations and provide guidance to support implementation. The aim is to better support you in understanding what does IFRS S1 and S2 mean for you and for your organization. Identify readiness gaps, understand where you are currently in the current state perspective, and learn practical steps in terms of implementation from an IFRS S1 and IFRS S2 reporting perspective. The aim of our webinar series is mainly to support organizations in creating more knowledge from a sustainability perspective. We can support organizations navigate the new landscape of sustainability and sustainable work practices as you move on, and also look at supporting organizations with embedment, maturity, where they're going. I mean, many organizations we speak to across industries have various different degrees of maturity and understanding from a sustainability perspective. I mean, promising we've seen, and as I released in November last year, there's a positive outlook across the globe, especially in Africa and South Africa, of organizations still looking to invest in sustainability, which means they're taking it seriously. We've seen many organizations put these sustainability reporting into the integrated reports and looking to gain momentum in terms of maturity of reporting. Critically is we want to see consistency, we want to see some standardization, we want to see impact-driven reporting when it comes to sustainability across industries, across organizations as we move forward. Some organizations have taken the option to wait to see when regulations will become mandatory, looking for timelines, etc. But we've seen a positive shift in this area, and our aim is to continue this webinar series to pick different topics that we can engage on. We can bring experts into the room to share their understandings, share their experiences, and support you as organizations in terms of creating better maturity as you move forward through the landscape of sustainability. In order to kickstart that, we're also launching pre-readiness IFRS S1 S2 questionnaire or assessment. We share the link on the chat. It's free for you today. It allows you to get a very quick readiness score in terms of where are you in your organization, and where do you need to focus on to get IFRS S1 and S2 ready. It focuses on, it's a very short assessment. We've put it together with our experts who you'll hear from in the panel discussion, as well as our digital partner, GoViva, in terms of putting together a very short, quick assessment of an organization and the key areas around governance, climate disclosures, risk integration, and emissions measurement. That's critical for you to understand where you are in the journey from an IFRS S1 S2 reporting perspective, but also gives you a quick understanding of where you need to focus and how can you move forward with regards to it. So please take the time. My team will post it in the chat. It's fairly quick, and you get an instant report to say what is your score from a readiness perspective and where do you need to focus. We're then happy to hand over to you and reach out to you and support you in moving forward. We also have put together and packaged IFRS S1 and S2 readiness in the box solution. It's an expert-led digital solution to simplify sustainability reporting. It's not an area which we need to hide away from or be confused with the terminology and the acronyms, etc. It's an area which we simplified, and we're there to support you as you navigate this journey with regards to it. So without further ado, I think I am your host, but I'm not the knowledge expert only. We've got a panel and a list of lineup of speakers who from different industry who's ready to share with you their understanding and help support you in this S1, S2 reporting journey. So for today's proceedings, we have two items planned. One, a keynote address that will be exploring key elements and aspects from a IFRS S1 S2 reporting perspective, and then of course an expert-led panel that will double-click into taking you through the ocean of sustainability reporting and help you navigate as you swim through that landscape. I encourage you and implore you to please listen attentively, interact via the chat box, so you can post your questions in the chat and post comments in the chat, etc. But please listen attentively, as we have passionate experts who've got real experience in this space to share with you their knowledge and experience as they move forward. We do have a separate Q&A session that we're part of the panel discussions toward the end of it for you to pose any questions verbally if you'd like to. But like I said, please post questions on the chat and we can take it from there as we move on. I think for me, it takes great pleasure to welcome our first speaker. I'm honored to introduce her. Her name is Loshni Naidu. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Loshni brings 18 years of experience in climate change, sustainability, and services, as well as ESG. She is, for me, a sustainability trailblazer, currently focusing on JSE sustainability efforts, measuring the measurement of ESG metrics for listed clientele, and reinforcing the Boris's ongoing ambition to transform, improve regulation, and building a more sustainable future. She also represents the Johannesburg Stock Exchange at various industry panels relating to sustainability, responsible investing, and climate change. Please join me to give Loshni a warm welcome to the virtual podium as she takes us through some key concepts from IFRS S1 and S2 reporting perspective. Loshni, over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, Omar, and good morning, everyone that's joined us today. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I am looking forward to having this conversation. So let's get straight into it. So for years, and I think we're all quite aware that sustainability reporting has been growing rapidly, but I think the challenge that we've always seen is that it has always been in parallel to financial reporting or as an add-on. And what is happening currently is we're seeing that shift where sustainability being that add-on into being something that's now being integrated into the core architecture of capital markets. So for the next 20 minutes, I am going to just give you a quick overview of where we are, what IFRS S1 S2 means for you as a company, what you can expect or what markets are asking of you, And just very high level, because I'm sure we'll unpack this in the panel, some of the how do we get started? Because the last thing we want is suddenly this becomes something that's a mandatory expectation and we're all caught wanting. So if we start from a high level, just taking one step back and just, big picture, and this graph map, is being updated quite regularly. So since the launch of IFRS S1 and S2, where S1 is your general sustainability guidelines and S2 is your climate disclosure, we see an ever increasingly across various jurisdictions either an adoption or a commitment to adoption. So I think this was at the end of 2025. There was over 21 jurisdictions who have committed to adopting or have started already integrating the standards into their current jurisdiction profiles. We see an additional 16 jurisdictions who've also made a formal commitment. If we just concentrate, on Africa for a moment, Nigeria has embedded S1 and S2 into the regulatory framework through their Financial Reporting Council. Kenya is proposing a roadmap. Ghana, Tanzania, Zambia are actively aligning both through their regulators as well as their professional bodies. And in South Africa, I'm actually not going to pick on that because we have Chuma, who's going to be part of the panel, and I'd rather let Chuma actually give a perfect overview of the progress we are making in South Africa. And I think maybe just to pause quickly to acknowledge that IFRS S1 and S2 are not the only standards, and we see other jurisdictions approaching this slightly differently, specifically the EU, who has the ESRS or the European Sustainability Reporting Standards under the Corporate Social Reporting Dialogue. There's so many acronyms and I'm trying to remember them. And where they've based their climate disclosures and sustainability disclosures from a GRI perspective, which is the Global Reporting Initiative. Though both the EU as well as the ISSB have come out and stated that both these standards are interoperable. And just a quick stop across the pond to the US, where the SEC climate rules are more limited, but the rules that the SEC was planning on introducing has currently been delayed due to litigation. And I think we're all quite keenly aware of how the US is approaching climate risk and climate disclosure in general. So I just want to create a perspective that although IFRS is considered the dominant sustainability reporting standard that's accelerating across the globe, there are two other standards to be aware of. So a lot of people do ask, so how is this different from prior ESG reporting approaches? And there are a couple of key points that we need to consider. So S1 and S2 are explicitly investor focused, and the intention is to anchor enterprise value to cash flows, access to capital, and cost of capital, access to finance. They're also designed to integrate with mainstream reporting. So when I started off and where I said there is kind of a parallel approach to sustainability report alongside financial reporting, what S1 and S2 will try and do is pull sustainability reporting into the land of financial reporting. There is also increasing expectations from both regulators and supervisors for more credible, integrated information. So just very quickly, what are some of the adoption approaches that we've seen? And this varies. It is usually full adoption of the standards. So what that means is jurisdictions are not necessarily taking S1 and S2 and rewriting them. It's an adopt as issued. We do see jurisdictional reliefs and phasing mechanisms being applied. And when we talk about jurisdictional reliefs, it speaks to mainly reliefs around scope 3. So you'll see that in S2, it will ask for disclosures on S1 is scopes 1, scopes 2, scopes 3. sorry. And there is relief around scope 3, because that is going to be quite a bit of a challenge for companies in unpacking and understanding their entire value chain from a climate risk exposure perspective, collating all of that information and reporting it as part of their annual disclosure. So the thing around, the one more that I do want to mention is proportionality. So we do see proportional application for smaller entities, non-listed, and for certain sectors, because this is going to be quite a shift where companies are now expected to access and collate and manage information with the same rigor as they do with financial information. And it is going to take time to actually get a lot of the systems and processes in place. So swiftly moving on to what is IFRS and S2? What is it about? So I mentioned that S1 speaks to general requirements of sustainability-related financial disclosures. It is an attempt to consolidate what we would call an alphabet soup. And then S2 speaks mainly to climate-related disclosure. And so for companies who have been doing climate-related disclosure, most companies have been using the TCFD framework, which is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and S2 is based on that. So the architecture has drawn from the 4 pillars of TCFD, which speaks to governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. So the expectation is that in your climate disclosure that you would include climate risks and opportunities, that you would speak to physical and transition risks, that you would start looking at transition planning, including scenario analysis. And from a climate metrics perspective, there is an expectation that scopes 1, 2, and 3 will be measured and disclosed in line with the greenhouse gas protocol. And to emphasize again, scope 3 is something that we will all need to spend time with, because scope 3 really sits in our value chain. I think from a developments in future where ISSB S1 and S2 is going, or the IFRS Foundation, is that the expectation is they have, my apologies, there isn't an intent to layer on very quickly additional standards. The focus quite immediately is to embed S1 and S2 to make sure there's proper application of these 2 standards. And as of yesterday, what we have heard is that even though the IFRS Foundation was thinking of an S3 in terms of nature-related risks and opportunities or biodiversity, as of yesterday, they have indicated that this will be now a practice note rather than, a separate standard. But adding on to, from the IFRS Foundation's perspective, not in adding on so many standards very quickly, it is really about implementation quality. And if you visit their website, there is a lot of guidance on how to disclose, how to interpret these standards. I think as important as explaining what they are, we need to just take a moment to recognize what IFRS S1 and S2 are not. And I guess these go to and speak to sustainability reporting as well, in general. Sustainability reporting, these standards are not intended to create disclosures that are marketing documents, that speak to, all the glossies that we usually see. It is about integrating with financial reporting. It's not a separate exercise that we just tack on or add on. S1 and S2 also doesn't speak to broad impact reporting. There are other standards that will look at that. And it's really about creating those, and I think Omar also said this, decision useful, investor focused narratives. So again, to reiterate this point, it is sustainability disclosure is becoming part of the financial reporting system, and it mustn't be a parallel publication. So what are the expectations from regulators, investors, and even assurance providers? And the first one, and I know I've been saying this quite often, is about connectivity. So for sustainability disclosure to become part of the financial reporting discipline, what that requires is that processes, systems, your entire architecture or business model of your organization has to pull in sustainability. So as an example, you have to include your enterprise risk management team. It's building the internal controls. It's having the correct financial systems that support this. So when you're having the budgeting and planning conversations, sustainability is integrated to those conversations. It forms part of the strategy. It forms part of impairment and provisioning discussions, and you have the right governance aspects. Because what this does is it's trying to articulate those sustainability risks and opportunities that affects prospects and enterprise value. And so those business units or divisions or functions or roles within the organizations that I just mentioned, these are all directly impact enterprise value or are directly impacted by enterprise value. So finally, for me, sustainability is getting the recognition it deserves from a financial aspect, because sustainability risks and opportunities have always had a financial impact, and it is recognizing that financial impact. And before I move on to governance, I think where we as South Africans or the South African community have an advantage, we have a long culture of voluntary sustainability reporting. We also have a culture of integrated thinking and integrated reporting, which is underpinned by the King 5 Code and the King Code tradition. So I think here what helps us is leveraging on our tradition and leveraging on the knowledge that we already have from our history of integrated reporting. The second element is governance. So what investors are now going to ask is not that you have governance in place, but how is sustainability governance managed? So it's about, again, disclosures, processes, controls, like the TCFD structures asked. It's the first element is governance. So we are used to ensuring that climate risk has a governance structure. So investors and regulators are going to ask, yes, we know that sustainability is important, but tell me who is accountable, how are decisions made, and whether oversight over these aspects are actually embedded. So can you, as an organization, explain sustainability governance the same way that you explain financial governance? And the last element here, and there's many more, but the main one is strategy and resilience. So you may have come across scenario analysis as part of a normal ERM function or your risk function, but this speaks directly or more specifically to climate scenario analysis. And I think maybe just to keep in the back of your head, coming down the line, because we know nature reporting is also a reality, that nature scenario analysis is something that we're going to have to think about, because finally we are doing that very direct link between climate and nature. So IFRS S2 expects disclosure about resilience using scenario analysis, transitioning planning, and linking climate to strategic decision making. So this is becoming a lot more visible and a lot more linked. So it pushes organizations to measure emissions we measure emissions and we disclose our emissions and our carbon footprint to state how we understand what our climate exposure is, what strategic options we have in responses to our climate risk, and how we are allocating capital accordingly. So finally, just to highlight a few things and bring it together in terms of saying these are the things that you need to think about as we move forward. I think one of the single most important things about why we need to get ready is that as we see across all these jurisdictions, mandatory reporting in some way, shape, or form for S1 and S2 sustainability reporting is a reality. And we don't want to be playing catching up with our peers and competitors. And economies want to remain competitive in the global landscape. And that's why we really do see this transition. So we do need to move quite rapidly. And it's important to close the gap before this becomes a mandatory requirement in our jurisdiction or in other jurisdictions where we operate. Now, the gaps that we see are really not about willingness. It's more about organizations having the capability and their current operating models. So really what this means for companies and South African companies, it's being able to demonstrate that you have governance, proper governance structures over your sustainability data, that there's real integration with financial planning. So this means that your sustainability teams and your financial teams, your operational teams have to become a lot closer to one another, and that you're also demonstrating readiness for assurance. So what would I suggest as focus areas for the next 6 to 12 months? Treat IFRS S1 S2 sustainability reporting, because you could be working in other jurisdictions like the EU where their sustainability reporting requirements will kick in. Treat them as a future state of reporting. So not this is a theoretical practice, that this is a reality. So if you haven't been doing sustainability reporting, start or try and improve some of your reporting that you're currently doing. And that is about assessing your readiness. What governance structures do you have? What data systems? Do you have internal controls? Are you collecting this data, the sustainability data? Who owns that data? Do you have capability gaps in your teams, whether it's financial teams or your sustainability teams? Do you have the ability to collect the data, understand, unpack, manage it, package it, and reporting? In terms of roles and responsibilities and boundaries, and I guess I've emphasized this a couple of times, is clarify the boundaries across your various divisions, because yes, your teams need to work closer. Your functions need to be cross-functional, but clarify the boundaries so everybody knows exactly where they start and where they stop, where ownership of data starts and where it stops. This is going to help, especially when you move into the assurance part of the piece, because assurance is coming. The same way you do your financial audits, there will be an expectation that assurance of the sustainability information will follow the same route. So build in those controls, and how you approach financial data, approach the same way your sustainability data. The element that I didn't add here is about monitoring regulation, and this speaks to just keeping an eye out on what is happening. And I think this is a good time for me to just reiterate the JSE's position around mandatory reporting. So our position remains that we believe that sustainability reporting requirements need to be placed in the correct regulatory framework. And at a national level, we believe that's through the Companies Act. And we are supportive of the current approach that the DTIC and SIPC are taking in terms of their policy formulation around sustainability reporting. And we, as the JSE, are participating and engaging to provide input into that process. So until there is clarity, and I do not want to put words into Chuma's mouth, until we know where we're going and there's certainty, two things from the JSE's perspective. We have not made changes to the listing requirements, and we will only do so once we've deliberated, and again, once we have a clear way forward from a country perspective. And the second thing, from a guidance, I think most of you are aware that we have the JSE's disclosure guidance, the climate and the sustainability guidance, which remain voluntary. Still useful documents, because we did go through that process. So please, if you want to use them, you're more than welcome to help you guide your sustainability reporting. And again, we will make a decision on what we do with that guidance once we know where we are going as a country and we've deliberated internally. And I think the last point on this slide is around the board engagement. Is engage with the ExCo, engage with board, bring everybody along with you on this journey, because what the board does need to understand, and your ExCo, is that this is not just a compliance function, that there is real value in what you are doing with all of this type of reporting. So I do want to just quickly wrap up to leave you with three messages. So the direction of travel that we've seen is very clear, that sustainability reporting must be integrated into your financial reporting. Sustainability reporting is our future. It is not something that we add on as we have currently been doing. It is key, it is critical to ensure embedding for this type of reporting to have the value and the impact that it could, by making sure that there is integration and embedding across all of your functions and roles, risk, governance, strategy, etc. And lastly, the winners in this whole space is not going to be those that produce the lovely, wonderful, glossy reports. It's those that bring and develop the strongest capability across the organization, and that's disclosure capability. So making sure that you have credible data, clear governance, defensible disclosures. So my final call to action is really going to be that use this period to build your disclosure capability. Make sure that you are ready to take advantage of how this positions you. And as South Africa charts a way forward for itself, please participate in all the consultations that will be happening so that we actually shape a future that we want as South Africa. So thank you so much. I am looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Loshni. Please, let's give a virtual round of applause. But thank you so much, Loshni, for sharing your insights. I think, as you said, it's encouraging to see the move in the right direction in this space. But as you said, colleagues, we've heard from the leader in the JSE. The key thing is to start. If you haven't started, let's start reporting. And if you started, let's look at how do we mature it and take it forward from there. I think a key thing for me of what you said is it's about making sure you assess your readiness, understand where you are, look at embedding practices in terms of your reporting, getting some consistency in it. And the third thing is, what I like that you said is, of course, understanding your data, understanding the flow of the data, and making sure you understand and able to represent it and mature it as you move forward with regards to that there. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing the insights from your perspective. Thank you very much. Okay, so it takes us to the second point of our agenda. Quite interested to hear our panelists in terms of their expert knowledge and interest in this field. It gives me a pleasure to welcome my colleague and our panel host, Sumaira Jaffer. She is a leader in S&G Grant Thornton in the sustainability space. She leads our sustainability advisory practice. Very passionate, as you'll see when she starts speaking on this topic, very knowledgeable. And it supports clients across the spectrum from sustainability, all the way from knowledge and awareness through helping organizations set strategy, dispel myths around it, understand the acronyms, and deeper understanding across your ESG, support organizations on targets and KPI settings, look at risk postures from a sustainability perspective, as well as looking at it from a reporting and an assurance landscape and viewpoint. So, Sumaira, I hand over to you to introduce the panel and take us through a deeper perspective from a sustainability IFRS S1 and S2 reporting. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I think my family jokes that I eat, breathe, and sleep sustainability. I'm not sure how many of them know what it is, but yeah, that's what it goes like. So my job here today is to be the panel host. I'm very excited to do so. We have a great lineup of panelists, and I just want to thank everyone for being here. So let's get straight into it. Over the past few years, ESG reporting has evolved significantly. What was once largely voluntary, narrative-driven, and often marketing-led is now becoming far more rigorous, strategic, and financially relevant. So today what we see is boards, investors, regulators, lenders, and stakeholders in general, they're asking us tougher questions. Can sustainability data be trusted? We're hearing data throughout all the conversations. Is climate risk reflected in strategy? We're talking about our disclosures. Are they comparable and decision useful? A big point that ISSB wants to achieve in terms of comparability. And more increasingly, are organizations generally prepared for the ISSB era? So that is why today's conversation really matters. The introduction of the ISSB standards S1 and S2 marks a major shift from broad ESG reporting to integrated finance-grade sustainability disclosure. I don't know how the CFOs in the room feel about that, a lot of them taking interest in this matter at this point. For South African organizations, this presents both a challenge and an opportunity. A challenge because organizations still rely on fragmented data, manual processes, and disconnected ownership models. We've seen this a lot in internal control frameworks. An opportunity because early movers can strengthen trust, attract capital, improve resilience, the big word for this year, and lead in their sectors. So today we'll unpack what readiness really looks like, what organizations should do next, and what risks arise from delay. So I'm delighted to welcome our panelists. First up is Loshni. You've all heard from her today. Loshni from the JSE. Umar has done an excellent job in introducing you. We've heard what you've had to say as well. We welcome your insights into the panel. Thank you, Loshni. Next, we have Mr. Chuma Zwane. I'm told that Mr. Zwane is a big hot ticket item for this webinar. Everyone wants to hear what he has to say, and many people are excited to hear. So let me tell you a bit about Mr. Zwane. Chuma Zwane is a senior investigator from the Corporate Compliance and Disclosure Regulation Unit at the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, where he leads the annual financial statements team and oversees the administration of South Africa's XBRL financial reporting regime. He plays an active role in shaping sustainability reporting in the country, serving as the deputy chairperson of the Adoption Readiness Working Group and contributing to national policy through the DTIC-led ISSB Steering Committee. Chuma has also represented CIPC on international and local setting standard bodies, including the IFRS International Taxonomy Consultative Group and IRBA's Committee for Audit Standards. With a strong foundation in regulatory oversight, financial reporting, and policy development, he brings a highly informed perspective on the evolving sustainability disclosure landscape. Welcome, Chuma. Next, we have the lady behind the technology, Deepshika Dalchan. At S&G Grant Thornton, we are all about women empowerment, especially in the fields of technology, so very excited to have a female here. On a side note, be sure to check out our Women in Business report for 2026. You can find it on our website. Deepshika Dalchan is the head of ESG Solutions and Delivery at GoViva, where she leads the design and implementation of end-to-end ESG data reporting and performance solutions. With a strong background in environmental science, project management, and operations, she works closely with organizations across sectors to embed ESG across the full life cycle, from carbon measurement and strategy to reporting and implementation. She brings deep practical experience in delivering investor-grade disclosures, having led development of numerous stock exchange mandated sustainability reports. Deepshika combines technical expertise with a delivery-focused mindset, helping organizations transition from fragmented ESG efforts to structured audit-ready systems. Welcome, Deepshika. And last but not least, we have our doctor in the house, Dr. Ernst Swartz. Dr. Ernst is an environmental sustainability expert with over 2 decades of experience in climate research, greenhouse gas emission analysis, carbon strategy, and sustainability reporting. Holding a PhD in science, he transitioned from academia into full-time environmental consulting and has since led high-impact projects across Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. His work spans across multinational banks, mining houses, and global development agencies, bringing a strong technical and strategic perspective to climate and ESG implementation. Thank you once again to all the panelists for agreeing to be part of the panel and share your insights. So let's get straight into it. We'll begin with Loshni. Loshni, obviously we're going to ask you some JSE related question. We all want to know what you have to say from that perspective. So from your vantage point in the capital markets, what are the biggest readiness challenges organizations are facing today as they transition towards ISSB aligned reporting? Over to you, Loshni.
Thank you so much, Sreya. I probably mentioned a few of them when I started, but maybe to give a perspective from from a general sustainability reporting, and then just add on where I think some of the challenges are going to be for an ISSB S1 S2. So we ran, when we launched the JSE disclosure guidance in 2022, the climate and the sustainability. On the back of that guidance, we undertook a piece of work to look at the cost benefit analysis of implementing sustainability reporting, and we used the guidance as proxy, and I want to use that research and the outputs from that research as a proxy to implementation, any standard, ISSB, GRI, whatever, but because it speaks to, this is a different form of reporting that companies may not necessarily be affair with, right? So some of the challenges that we identified through that research was, we've mentioned data, right, in this conversation so far. So data, having access to the right data, because some companies don't measure this data, they don't collect it, they don't record it in any way, shape, or form. So making sure that you build the right systems, processes, etc., and getting that in place to be able to access that data, and in making and ensuring that you build in the right controls. So like we said before, it's, you have a similar control environment that you apply to financial data, you do the same to this kind of data. The second element is funding, resources in general, right? So do you have the funding capabilities to either build teams, build systems, purchase systems, or implement your own systems? Or if you don't have, if you can't hire the right people, can you bring in consultants? All of this requires funding. So that was the second biggest challenges a lot of companies found is, okay, other than capacity and competency within my current teams, do I have funding for whether it's education, hiring, system implementation? Capacity building, competency building, that's also important because we do need to have the right skills. Sustainability reporting, yes, has enjoyed a growth and a spurt in the country and I think globally over the years. So the wonderful thing is we have a lot more sustainability professionals who understand the space coming into the market. And that's just sustainability reporting, right? And I think, you know, we can leverage that. The learning and the capacity and competency building, where we do have a bit of a challenge now, is doing that link from sustainability reporting into financial disclosure. I think all of us in space, whether we've worked in sustainability or haven't, or new to it, and whether we have worked in the financial space, you know, accountants, financial reporters who have that ability and experience, I think this is a new area for all of us in trying to, how do we interpret all of this information so we have credible, decision useful disclosures at the end of the day. The last point I think I want to make is we have to start seeing that shift from where we've treated some of this reporting as tick box exercises, where it's just boilerplates, yes, compliance, yes, we tick, 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 and we move on. And how do we embrace a new language? How do we ensure that we have the correct boundaries, methodologies, we understand like scenario analysis, and expand that out of our risk teams into a broader language for companies. I think the last point, assurance, but I think we'll touch on that one later. Thank you.
Thanks, Loshni. Thank you so much for those insights. You know, listening to you, you know, I work a lot in the enterprise and supplier development space by nature of my job. And, you know, what you're saying here is often what entrepreneurs feel, right? Funding, capacity building. So it just took me back to that as well. I mean, it feels like we're a startup and we're all trying to learn as we move along in this journey. You know, so I urge everyone here, you know, it is interactive. We're trying to also keep it interactive. Use the chat, use the question and answers. Please post your questions to any of these esteemed panelists if you want just to get some of the answers. But, you know, the next, I do want to say, and I do want to put it out before a lot of people ask it, is that Mr. Zwane does not know when the date of when any announcements will be made. So let us not put him under that pressure. But, you know, Chuma, turning to the regulatory lens in terms of ISSB reporting. So I want to ask you a question. I'm not sure, I don't see you on screen. Maybe if you can please just put your camera on. Welcome, Mr. Zwane. Thank you. But, tell us, how is South Africa positioning itself in relation to the adoption of IFRS S1 S2? If you can expand on that, for our audience to understand what's happening and what can they expect. Thank you, Chuma. Over to you.
Thank you, Sumaya. Just want to make sure I am visible because you said my camera is off.
Sorry, you are visible and I can hear you
wonderful.
clearly. Please go ahead, Mr. Zwane. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. No, thank you for having us as CIPC. I appreciate the invite, and I think as a disclaimer, I'm not being disruptive with my cardinal regalia. I was meant to be at the memorial service this morning. We lost a colleague in our sister department, corporate governance, surveillance, and enforcement. So as a result of that, I didn't get enough time to go and change into a different outfit for this session. So just my apologies for if it seems or appears that I am imposing my my beliefs, as it were, into this session. Yeah, and then in terms of audibility, is it 100%? Okay, wonderful. All right, so CIPC, as you announced earlier on, is constituted what we call the Adoption Readiness Working Group. This is on the back of our sustainability reporting breakfast roundtable, which the commissioner hosted in 2023 September, where we just brought the market together, as well as fellow regulators, to check the pulse of where we are as a country in the ESG space, number one, and map, potential value propositions for standardizing ESG reporting by adopting or developing our own sustainability standards. If you read the National Treasury paper financing the green transition or financing a greener economy, there were recommendations there about adopting or developing our own standards in order to report for account for sustainability at transaction level and also at portfolio level, among other things. So we then took it upon ourselves. The commissioner prominently made sure he puts performance indicators in our performance agreements in the sustainability space, not as part of necessarily bringing compliance into the space, but supporting the market in its voluntary adoption or use of the standards, as well as preparing for the transition where we might possibly land sooner rather than later into a mandatory sustainability reporting regime. So with that, we now, as I said, chair LCIPC, the Adoption Readiness Working Group, the ARWG. JSE is a member of that group. We had a meeting yesterday just as a pulse check and clean up some of our governance and administrative processes and systems and structures. So we are in the motions or in the works of preparing in-house as a regulator, working together with who will chair a different body called the Sustainability or the Special Sustainability Reporting Advisory Committee that will be more interdepartmental for government policy intersection points to map that, and then we will focus on the technicalities of the various standards and how, as tools, serve as enablers to achieve the policy objectives. So that's where we are from a admin perspective. We are, however, considering, as Loshni said, standardizing the ecosystem so that we militate against fragmented reporting, and obviously assurance will come into play as well as part of the considerations. I do know that IRBA has already signed off or adopted ISA 5,000 for assurance, but they're looking at, I think, limited assurance at this stage and not reasonable assurance. So the regulators are preparing for what may possibly come, and we're leaning in and weighing in supporting the market. We have seen indicators already where there is a gradual shift towards or a high appetite or a significant appetite to shift towards mandatory reporting regime. The DTIC's regulatory impact assessment report indicates that. Our own Alex Forbes CIPC paper also indicates that, the market sentiment report. And then now there's just a recent output as well called the gap analysis report on and policy recommendations over and above our own econometric sort of approach towards value chain resilience and trade resilience with our trade partners. So we've been proactive about what is coming and how do we best support the market in this space. We love the fact that JSE has launched, I think, its sustainability bonds. So in terms of its segments of listings, there's now that sustainability bond, which is in excess, I think, now of about 80 billion, consisting of about 109 instruments or bonds. So it's a good market signal about the direction of travel for the economy, and we have taken a proactive step in supporting that direction of travel as part of the transition into a more standardized reporting regime.
Thank you, Chuma. Thank you for that insight. Firstly, sorry to hear about the loss at the CIPC, and thank you for joining us despite having other commitments. So, from what I'm hearing, it's coming. We don't know when, we don't know how quickly, but we know it's coming, and organizations need to prepare accordingly. So with that being said, I want to just move over to Dr. Ernst to see, now that it's coming, we're still seeing it, and Loshni also said it as well. Organizations are seeing sustainability reporting as a reporting exercise, a tick box exercise. So what changes need to be made internally when ISSB is introduced? Dr. Ernst?
Thank you, Soumaya. Yep. So, I think the best way to answer that is to think about all of this as a evolutionary process. So the biggest shift will be that ISSB does not just require reporting changes, it also requires changes in information management and operations itself within organizations. What changes in practice is that ESG moves from a reporting function into the core of the organization. It becomes closely aligned with finance and risk because information now needs to stand alongside those. So at its most basic level, we'll look at recording an electricity bills, rands and cents, but now we'll also need to find a way for the kilowatt hours to go through all the information systems and for that to be monitored accurately. The second change is around data and controls. Organizations move away from report outputs towards structured and controlled data environments with clear methodologies that they can explain and defend, and processes that can be consistently applied and reviewed. And then the third shift, this was very nicely covered in the talk, is governance. Accountability becomes more explicit with clear ownership of data and increased oversight from senior management and audit structures. So that ownership is very important to help with communication and coordination. So to summarize, as organizations mature in their sustainability journey that we help organizations a lot with, they move from more descriptive sustainability reporting that's very good for a start, to producing more reliable, auditable information that supports critical decision making, with IFRS S1 and S2 representing a major step in enabling that shift and evolution.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you for that insight. I think, from what you're saying, it's very much what we're seeing governance practices come through. And it also takes me to King 5 and the way it's set up and how you follow a certain way of doing things so that you get to the right governance structures and control frameworks. So very much, I think, in reading ISSB, we should look at our King 5 framework and see how both can be applied. together as well, so it can be set up appropriately. And I've heard you say it, I heard Mr. Swane say it, I've heard Loshni say it, and a big key thing that's coming through is data. Often in all companies we say garbage in, garbage out. So data becomes very important, and in today's times, data has become gold. So I want to move over to Deepshika. Deepshika, let's talk data. I mean, you're in the space, you work with lots of volumes, you work with a lot of companies, you see a lot of things. But why is it that ESG data is still one of the biggest barriers to ISSB readiness? I mean, not only ISSB, we see it in all types of reporting. So what's the issue? Why is it the biggest barrier? Deepshika, do you want to come in here, please?
Yeah, definitely. That's a loaded question, but to be honest, I think a lot of points have been covered, by Loshni, Chuma, Dr. Ernst as well. But see, so far, if you see ESG, and reporting as well, it's kind of been treated more like a secondary exercise. But that's why IFRS is changing things, right? It wants companies to prepare reports that pass the stress test of investors, right? So it needs to be aligned with financial grade reporting. But the practical scenario on ground is that, companies are just trying to develop mechanisms to actually prepare for these requirements, right? But if you see, now if I take the example of, say, a real estate company that has maybe 200 locations, the chances are that in each of these locations, the type of data and the format in which it looks like is different, right? Some may be having data on Excel, some may be having data that's handwritten, and some may not even have that data at all. So it's fragmented, and you're dealing with lots and lots of stakeholders to try and get it into one place and try to standardize the mechanisms for actually getting that data, right? So data fragmentation is a very, very, big issue for companies that we're seeing globally, right? It's not only limited to South Africa. Companies globally are still struggling with this, right? But the other thing that is there is obviously data governance, which has been mentioned. Now, I'll give you another practical example. That data was received in Excel, from, say, the operations team. But then if we got to verifying that with the finance team, and it turned out that actually the data didn't match. Now, this happens for two reasons, right? First and foremost, the teams are working in silos. And the second thing is that the validation of that data, these are all control mechanisms that need to be built. So each and every data point now needs to be validated by someone, and that's the way that it'll actually pass assurance in the future. So companies need to build these systems in, which right now, many of them may not have them in place. And having the teams working in silos, I mean, the ESG department is trying to collect information from the operations department. The finance department is doing its own thing. HR is doing its own thing. The spectrum of metrics that need to be collected to cater to the requirements of IFRS S1 and S2 are vast. So getting all of these teams to work together and aligned on the same page is another very important problem that needs to be solved as well, right? But lastly, even the value chain problem is something that's, you could say uncharted territory for a lot of companies. Now, companies haven't figured out their own data yet, but now value chain requirements are also kicking in. So not only do they need to standardize their own metrics, but they need to train their suppliers as well as their downstream value chain partners as well to give them data that is actually auditable and assurable, right? So companies do have a lot to do. But slowly and steadily, I think these processes will be developed and these problems will be ironed out. But it's really important to actually crack this for multiple reasons, right? The IFRS or IFRS, goes on about sustainability risks and opportunities. But you cannot actually quantify what is the impact of a risk if you don't have your data in order, right? So for example, what's the impact of carbon tax? If you don't have your emissions data calculated and you're not sure about the data, you can't actually figure out the impact of carbon tax, right? So it's really important to quantify, to get the data in order first, and to get your house in order first before even focusing on the value chain, right? And in addition to that, the assurance mandates are kicking in. If it's not here already, it's going to come in soon. Then limited assurance will become reasonable assurance. And we've seen companies struggling with that, right? So getting these controls in place, getting the governance mechanisms, getting people working together, aligned, and also starting from the top are some key things which companies are working on slowly and steadily. And it's an uphill challenge, but it's definitely something that can be ironed out.
Thanks, Deepshika. I think you're just getting into the meat of it, and by some of the things you're saying, it's giving me a bit of goosebumps. I can't imagine what it's doing to the people in the room. There's a huge task ahead of us. But as you say, as we start tackling this year, slowly but surely, we will be able to get to the next phase. And now the next part of the conversation, it might be a bit of a very uncomfortable part of the conversation, and many people want to understand it, and it also pushes many people. But we're talking around consequences. What is the consequences for not doing ISSB? And that's what a lot of companies are asking from both a investor perspective as well as in regulatory perspective. So this, I'm going to pose this question to both Loshni and then Chuma afterwards, starting off with Loshni, to say, what are the real risks for organizations that delaying their ISSB readiness journey? And when we're talking about it, we're talking here about it from an investor perspective. Are you seeing, investors already penalizing poor quality or weak disclosures? What are you seeing in that space? Is the information being requested more? So just from that, Loshni, if you can just expand and explain to us, taking into account where you sit at the JSE. Thanks, Loshni.
Sure, Sumaya. So I would start with, we're not seeing it directed to ISSB because we don't have those kind of reports yet. But if you look backwards and you use climate reporting, because that's what a lot of companies have been doing quite extensively over the years, over and above their sustainability reporting. And I wouldn't necessarily say penalize in terms of there's a fine or there's an actual financial transaction of some kind where money's leaving the organization. It's not yet, right? Because in certain jurisdictions, we are seeing legal, litigation, a lot of litigation around greenwashing, around reporting, around disclosures in terms of not about the poor quality of the disclosures, but what the content of those disclosures, what they are actually saying, because there is misrepresentation or it can be equated to almost fraud-like behavior. But that hasn't come into the South African sphere as yet. I think one of the biggest challenges, other than greenwashing, it's that reputational issue for companies. That's the risk, right? And that risk has knock-on effects. Because we are finding that consumers are a lot more savvy. They are asking some difficult questions. And I'll take the JSE as an example. The questions that we get around ESG and sustainability are from investors, from some of our partners, and from NGOs who do come to the AGM, or as part of investor roadshows, or we'd get the emails. We actually get on calls to explain our position on climate risk. The JSE, not necessarily our products or services, but as the JSE as a company, what are we doing around our own climate risk and exposure? What is our climate strategy? Annually, there is one of our partners where I go through the whole process of explaining our strategy, how do we respond, how we have performed against that strategy. So it's not just, hey, as companies, you put out these wonderful disclosures and commitments, and these are the things we're going to achieve. We do get the questions, how are you actually achieving this? Show us demonstrable proof that you are moving in that direction. And the point that I actually just want to close off this with is the real risk if you don't disclose, you don't have good disclosures, that credible disclosures, that you don't have transparency in the disclosure, or you hold back on disclosing information because of uncertainty or worry that it might be perceived as greenwashing or anything like that. The real risk for companies is that if that information is not out there and you have lost control of that narrative. So companies, investors, NGOs, etc., are going to fill in the gaps with their own narrative. And that is an even bigger risk in what your disclosures and what you're putting out there for yourself. So thanks, Maya.
Thanks, Roshni. In governance talk, we say it's the tone at the top, and that's what JSC is setting in this case. Yeah. What are you doing in this instance? So it's similar to other companies as well. It's the tone at the top. What does the board have to say? And how do you take this then forward into the rest of the company and building a sustainability culture? But let's move over to Chuma. Chuma, if you could just maybe quickly tell us, do you foresee fines, penalties, etc. Do you foresee any regulatory consequences in the near term? Have you discussed this as the working group, and what would that look like if it does come into play?
Awesome. If I heard you right, you talk about regulatory consequences, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Awesome. Yeah. So at this stage, Sumaya, our focus primarily, before we even get to the compliance or regulatory compliance aspect and enforcement, is about supporting the market. Because obviously, if we, for example, adopt too soon or rush the adoption process, we incidentally cause companies to be non-compliant. So from a readiness lens, there will be a lot of capacity building interventions to prepare companies to comply. And I know you framed it around IFRS S1 and S2, but in reality, sustainability in the broader spectrum spills over into other standards like GRI and other frameworks locally, like the IR Integrated Reporting Framework. So we have not yet engineered or crafted the pieces that will speak to the Companies Act Amendment Bill in dealing with non-compliance at this stage. It's on the table, but we've not yet gotten to that part of the conversation, because obviously there will be incidental non-compliance, and in some cases boards, because of either apathy or lack of readiness, will lead to some form of non-compliance statuses. So at this stage, we haven't committed to, we're thinking about it, but we haven't committed to the nitty-gritties of how we will administer, for example, administrative fines and compliance notices, penalties, etc. It will come. The focus, however, for now is the support that we need to provide for reporters, as well as our own capacity internally to be able to isolate or single out proactively non-compliances or even prevent them, because what it does is, when you aggregate the data as a signal for the control, we might be construed or misconstrued to be, either greenwashing or greenhashing. But the reality ultimately is that if we don't institutionalize or inculcate sustainability thinking, the reporting itself will be superly or overly poor. So that's the major focus for now, in drumming in sustainability thinking, and obviously getting to the point where we phase in the mandate to avoid disruption, but also prepare the market for the juncture where compliance will be, or enforcement, compliance will be enforced after the relevant transition reliefs. So that's where we are now in the discussion, but it is on the table as to how we'll militate against areas of non-compliance in this space.
Thank you, Prima. I think people are breathing a bit of a sigh of relief, knowing that there has been any consequence management as yet. So that's a bit of a relief from that side. And I do sit part of your working group, and I must say that the CIPC and the DTI are really thinking about how to support this whole journey, and how to enable organizations within South Africa to be able to get the right assistance that they need in this space. So, as Loshni said, we urge you, your voice is important. Please, let us give our voices to the CIPC and DTI in the space. As we're coming towards the closing, I want to just touch a bit on targets and matrices, etc. We see it a lot, and Dr. Ernst, I'm going to look at you because you worked a lot in this space with regards to targets. So, what we see is that many organizations have these targets as we go into a bit of the technical side. But what we find is that delivery is often lagging, and why do organizations struggle to translate these targets into operational outcomes? And how can they close this gap? Because, as we go into this type of reporting, especially with the financial impact, this is going to become more and more important. So, Dr. Ernst, maybe if you can just touch on that for us as we go towards the end of our panel. And then, I would like to encourage people to please post any questions if they have any, and then before we wrap up. So, Doc, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Sumaya. So to answer that, it helps to take just one step back, and that's in, setting those targets, because it's very important to set the right targets and it requires clear understanding of what can realistically be achieved. And that's often, that disconnect between what's operationally possible and, what's strategically sort of the ambition. That's kind of where it starts. So the first issue, that targets are often not supported by defined delivery mechanisms. They are set at strategic level, but not translated into specific actionable projects. The second challenge is that there's a disconnect between strategy and operations, in terms of the operational teams are not always fully aligned or accountable, for what needs to be done. That's where the ownership comes back into it again. And then the implementation is therefore often unclear. The third issue is limited tracking and feedback. I guess that's again to do with integration and communication. Even where actions exist, organizations often lack a structured way to monitor progress, to measure impact, and to adjust their approach to try to track those targets. So the gap is often not in ambition, it's in translating the targets into structured, measurable, and accountable execution.
Thanks, Doc. I think we see that quite often in the spaces we work, especially in the consulting space around targets. So I hear you in terms of what you say. It's not in the ambition, it's in the translation. So we are moving towards the end of the panel discussion, and I think I want to actually end this year with some advice to our attendees who have been excellent. I'm glad to see that most of you have stayed till the end. So I want to ask the panel, if you had to prioritize just one starting point in this space here. So please, in other words, let's keep it a bit brief. If you have to prioritize one starting point, what should organizations focus on first to become ISSB ready over the next 12 to 24 months? So from your space where you said, please, what is the key thing that they need to look at? I'm going to start off with Loshni. Loshni, if you could maybe just share with us, what would your 1 point be?
Understanding your current state, and that's probably just having those initial conversations with your sustainability teams, your finance operational teams. Just understand what you have before you try to build anything that responds to S1, S2. Because believe me, I think most companies actually do have more in place than they may think. So that's it. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Loshni. That's an excellent point. We do a lot of these baseline assessments, and you're right. In South Africa, just by the nature of what we do, the nature of our regulation, the nature of our guidelines, the nature of what our JSE requires from us, you have a lot. It's just of how we then translate it and package it into a IFRS or an ISSB reporting manner. So thank you, Loshni. I think that's a great point. Chuma, from your side, what would be your 1 point point? Where do they start? Especially, you're sitting in that readiness group.
Yeah. Look, I think so. One, reporting is not about reporting as an end in and of itself. I obviously spoke about bringing in sustainability thinking into the discussion of the boards, but all the way down to Exco, Menco, operational staff, etc., in trying to understand how companies intend to embed sustainability into their strategies, but also re-engineer their business models to surface various risks and also the opportunities that come with through the lens of IFRS S1. Give an example. Basically, if you're in the manufacturing space, let's just say packaging, Nampak, for example, might need to shift from less carbon intensive material, and that means if they're providing waste, refuse bags for Johannesburg, pick it up, whatever the case may be, the municipality may insist on less carbon intensive material as part of their SLA. So Nampak in this scenario would need to look at how do you get the best mix between virgin material and synthetic. And a minor change in that may mean a higher contribution margin of the disposable plastics, and they may attract possibly cheaper financing, which then increases the bottom line at the end of the day. So in the literal sense, value chain resilience needs to be thought about at the granular level of what we do as a company and how we plan to survive or even transition or become more competitive 2, 3, 5 years down the line. So readiness comes with getting the proper understanding of what we mean by sustainability. Otherwise, reporting will just become an afterthought and just a compliance exercise. It might not achieve value chain resilience in the true sense, or even business resilience in the true sense, if it's an afterthought. So I would say companies must start investing into understanding what sustainability thinking is about. Get your boards trained on IFRS S1 S2 and complementary or supplementary, or whether I'm going to call it ancillary or auxiliary frameworks that support your specific reporting audience, but underpinned obviously by their own business strategy. And then they'll be ready to get the journey of surfacing the data points that are relevant to the reporting standard that will be prominently featured in the Companies Act when the time comes. So yeah, I would park it at that. I mean, there are many examples. Baldwin, for example, recently got financing from IFC, but they began this journey some time ago in bringing in lower cost housing. And they had to, I think they used a tool called Edge to just bring in less carbon intensive building material into their building projects. That's how they unlocked cheaper financing, and the end user, the resident who applies for a mortgage in that sense, also pays less interest. So the whole value chain stands to benefit if you really think about what it is that you're doing as a company and how you plan to transition or take advantage of sustainable finance, if I may. But in reality, it's about making your own business model more resilient in the manner in which economic architecture is changing at a rapid pace. So yeah, in the interest of time, I think I'll park it at that. Thanks, Omeo.
Thanks, Rima. I think you've made a great point. Understanding your value chain, especially with the risk that's going on in today's time, especially with the geopolitical risks, that understanding your value chain, localizing your value chain, bringing sustainability into your value chain becomes more and more important. Thanks, Rima. Deepshika, from your side, what would be the one point that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think I'll go for two if you don't mind. But the first one is embrace technology. And the reason why I say that is that a lot of options today now already have the internal data controls and mechanisms built in. So you don't need to start from scratch. can utilize these to kind of enhance your processes, in your organizations. And the second thing I'll say is, I think getting stakeholder buy-in from everybody who's involved, in your organization is key. And sensitizing them, doing trainings, getting that buy-in into why this is important. Maybe even having the scorecards, right, implemented at multiple levels. We've seen success, with respect to getting better data, getting people more invested in the entire exercise through this as well.
Thank you, Deepshika. I love it. Embrace technology. And I think that's what we're trying to also help organizations from our part. I've acknowledged also Tabiso's question, but I'm just going to park that because I think Umar is going to answer that in his wrap up when we talk about our new solution, IFRS S1 S2 in a box. So excited for that. Dr. Ernst, can we perhaps just have your one pointer? I know yours is going to be definitely practical and easy for organizations to follow.
Yeah, you've predicted it. It's probably reflects more the area that I like to work in, but I would say start with your data, not your report, and every year make progress on that. That gives you the opportunity to engage with the new, all the lovely technology. So build a structured, controlled data foundation aligned to your key sustainability metrics. Clear ownership, methodologies, and processes within your organization. And then once that data is reliable and traceable, things like governance reporting and targets become much easier to implement.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you for that. I think everyone gave really good ways on how we can go about in terms of the first step. So I hope everyone took some pointers from that. I want to then, just close up our panel and then hand over to Umar. I see we nearly up for time. If you could just allow us 2-3 more minutes. But thank you to our panelists for highly practical and insightful discussions, for the information, for letting us know what's coming up. So we really appreciate it, and for taking your time out to spend with our attendees today. We can see a few clear themes that have emerged. And I just want to touch on one or two of them, a few of them in terms of the themes. So, ISSB readiness is no longer a future issue. It is a current leadership priority. I think that's one thing that we really want to get across from our side. Everyone needs to hopefully has started speaking about it in their boardrooms, in their strategy sessions, in their operation modelings as well. And then, a big one, everyone spoke about it, high quality sustainability reporting depends on governance, ownership, and credible data. We're seeing that assurance is going to become a big part of IFRS S1 S2. And in order for you to get that good assurance report, you're going to need credible data. We can't work in silos. It's been said as before. Finance, sustainability, risk, operations, strategy must all work together. And organizations that start early will be better positioned for trust, resilience, and access to capital. So to everyone who joined us today, thank you for your time. Thank you for your engagement. We very much appreciate it. Thank you for your questions in the chat as well. To our distinguished panelists, Loshni, Chuma, Deepshika, and Dr. Ernst, really appreciate your time and for sharing your expertise. I will hand over to Umar for the closing remarks. Umar?
Perfect. Thank you, Sumaya, and thank you to your panel for an insightful discussion and shedding light. So thank you to our industry experts. The key takeaway for me, it's not just about compliance, as Chuma mentioned. It's about value creation and real business resilience. And for me, that's a good takeaway in terms of how do you create that in organizations. I think from Tabiso, in terms of your question, yes, there's many tools out there that can support where you're going to from a sustainability. And Deepshika mentioned embrace technology. I think from a SNG Grant Thornton perspective, we've certainly embraced technology and we support you. We've launched our IFRS S1 S2 in a box, which, like I said, is expert-led. So you got the right advice, and we've simplified it through the use of technology to support organizations in maturing where you need to go from a reporting perspective. Critical to be able to get your reporting out there, build maturity around it, and grow from there. I think to Loshni's point, first thing first is understand your current state, understand your readiness, understand where the gaps are. So like I said earlier in the conversation, do the readiness assessment. It will take you a quick few minutes to understand where you are. And let's have a further conversation in terms of where to next, and how do we help you and support you in getting ready from an IFRS S1 S2 reporting perspective. It's not going anywhere, but I guess we need to bake this into organization strategies as well as organizations' way of working as we move forward from a sustainability horizon in terms of new ways of work with regards to it. From my side, again, say thank you to everyone who's joined us. This, like I said, was our second edition of the Sustainability Dialogues webinar series. We will have another one coming through. Please reach out should you want to be part of the presentation panel. Should you have key insights or you'd like to know knowledge areas you'd like to hear more of, please reach out to myself or Sumaya or anybody in our organization, and we're happy to consider your topics, consider your ideas. Again, for me, the goal is for us to walk this journey together from a sustainability perspective and really see real change and impact in this space. I think the time is 11:30. Thank you for your time, and we will chat soon and hope to hear from you. So please reach out. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.